Okay, we'll start. Okay, welcome to Storytime with Srta Pikula on this Wednesday in May. I hope all of you are doing really well. And I'm going to do some shout outs. So my first shout out is going to go to Noah, student Noah. Noah is very patient and he makes me smile. Noah, you're doing a great job. So Noah, thanks for being so patient and always persevering and doing a really great job. I miss seeing you in person, and I miss seeing all of your drawings. Noah's also a really fantastic artist. He draws some fantastic things. And my next shout out is going to go to Ryder, because today is Ryder's birthday. So happy birthday, Ryder! I hope that you have a great day and a really cumpleaños feliz. Happy birthday, Ryder. And yeah, okay, so last time we were reading The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. We met some other, or we re-met some other friends that we remember from before and some new ones. So Reepicheep came on board. So Reepicheep's on board the ship. And we also met the captain, whose name is Drinian, a man named Drinian. And essentially, they're asking why they're on board and what are they doing. And Caspian said, well, remember, after my coronation, if I said I could get all Narnia into peace, that I would go and find out what happened to the 7 lords who Miraz sent away. And he's like, oh yeah, we remember that. So anyways, Caspian managed to get Narnia into all into order. It's 3 years later in Narnia. It's been a year later for the Pevensey children in their world, in our world. And in Narnia, instead of thousands of years passing, it's only been 3 years, because Narnian years pass differently. And anyways, he managed to get peace. Trumpkin is now in charge, and they're off on this voyage to find out what happened to the 7 lords that went to the Eastern Sea, and to see, did they die? Did they not die? Are they out there somewhere? What happened to them? Miraz just sent them off on a wild goose chase. So Caspian's out to find out. And let's find out more of what happens. They're finding out where they are in the ocean, actually. Okay. Let's see. Then, said Reepicheep, it is after the Lone Islands that the adventure really begins. Now, Caspian now suggested that they might like to be shown over the ship before supper, but Lucy's conscience smote her, and she said, I think I really must go and see Eustace. Seasickness is horrid, you know. If I had my old cordial with me, I could cure him. But you have, said Caspian. I'd quite forgotten about it. As you left it behind, I thought it might be regarded as one of the royal treasures, and so I brought it with. If you think it ought to be wasted on a thing like seasickness. It'd only take a drop, said Lucy. Caspian opened one of the lockers beneath the bench and brought out the beautiful little diamond flask, which Lucy remembered so well. Take back your own, Queen, he said. They then left the cabin and went out into the sunshine. In the deck, there were 2 large, long hatches, fore and aft of the mast, and both open, as they always were in the fair weather, to let light and air into the belly of the ship. Caspian let them down on a ladder into the after hatch. Here they found themselves in a place where benches for rowing ran from side to side and the light came in through the oar holes and danced on the roof. Of course, Caspian's ship was not that horrible thing, a galley rowed by slaves. Oars were used only when the wind failed or for getting in and out of harbor, and everyone, except Reepicheep, whose legs were too short, had often taken a turn. At each side of the ship, the space under the benches was left clear for the rowers' feet, but all down the center there was a kind of pit which went down into the very keel, and this was filled with all kinds of things: sacks of flowers, casks of water, barrels of pork, jars of honey, skin bottles of wine, apples, nuts, cheese, biscuits, turnips, sides of bacon. From the roof, that is, from the underside of the deck, hung hams and strings of onions, and also the men of the watch off duty in their hammocks. Caspian led them aft, stepping led them forward, stepping from bench to bench. At least it was stepping for him, and something between a step and a jump for Lucy, and a really long jump for Reepicheep. In this way, they came to a partition with a door in it. Caspian opened the door and led them into a cabin which filled the stern underneath the deck cabins of in the poop deck. It was, of course, not so nice. It was very low, and the sides sloped together as they went down, so that there was hardly any floor. And though it had windows of thick glass, they were not made to open because they were underwater. In fact, at this very moment, as the ship pitched, they were alternately golden with sunlight and dim green with the sea. "You and I must lodge here, Edmund," said Caspian. "We'll leave your kinsmen the bunk and the sling hammocks for ourselves." "I beg you, your majesty," said Drinian. "No, no, shipmate," said Caspian. "We have argued all that out already. You and Rince was the mate, are sailing the ships, and we have cares and will have cares and labors many a night when we are singing catches or telling stories. So you and he must have the port cabin above. King Edmund and I can lie very snug here below. But how is the stranger?" Eustace, very green in the face, scowled and asked whether there was any sign of the storm getting less. But Cassian said, "What storm?" And Drinian burst out laughing. "Storm, young master," he roared, "this is a fair weather as a man could ask for." "Who's that?" asked Eustace irritably. "Send him away. His voice goes through my head." "I brought you something to make you feel better, Eustace," said Lucy. "Oh, go away and leave me alone," growled Eustace. But he took a drop of her flask, and though he said it was beastly stuff, the smell in the cabin when she opened it was delicious, by the way. It is certain that his face came the right color a few moments after he swallowed it, and he must have felt better because instead of wailing about the storm in his head, he began demanding to be put ashore and said that at the first port he would lodge a disposition against them all with the British Council. But when Reepicheep asked what a disposition was and how you lodged it, Reepicheep thought it was some new way of arranging a single combat. Eustace could only reply, "Fancy not knowing that." In the end, they succeeded in convincing Eustace that they were already sailing as fast as they could towards the nearest land they knew, and that they had no power of sending him back to Cambridge, which was where their Uncle Harold lived, than of sending him to the moon. After that, he sulkily agreed to put on the fresh clothes which had been put out for him, and to come on the deck. Caspian now showed them over the ship, though indeed they had seen most of it already. When they went up to the forecastle and saw the lookout man standing on the little shelf made inside the gilded dragon's neck and peering through its open mouth. Inside the forecastle was the galley, or the ship's kitchen, and quarters for such people as the boatswain, the carpenter, the cook, and the master archer. If you think it odd to have a galley in the bows and imagine the smoke coming from its chimney streaming back over the ship, that is because you are thinking of steamships where there is always a headwind. On a sailing ship, the wind is coming from behind, and anything smelly is put as far forward as possible. They were taken up to the fighting top, and at first it was rather alarming to rock to and fro and to see the deck looking so small and far away beneath. You realize that if you fell, there was no particular reason why you should fall on board rather than in the sea. Then they were taken to the poop deck, where Rince was on duty with another man at a great tiller, and behind that the dragon's tail rose up, covering the gilding, and round inside it ran a little bench. The name of the ship was Dawn Treader. She was only a little bit of a thing compared to one of our ships, or even with the cogs, dromonts, carracks, and galleons which Narnia had owned when Lucy and Edmund had reigned there under Peter the High King, for nearly all navigation had died out of the reigns of Caspian's ancestors. When his uncle Miraz had sent the seven lords to sea, they had to buy a galleon ship and man it with hired galleon sailors. But now Caspian had begun to teach the Narnians to be seafaring folk once more, and the Dawn Treader was the finest ship he had built yet. She was so small that forward to the mast there was hardly any deck room between the central hatch and the ship's boat on one side and the hen coop. Lucy fed the hens on the other. But she was a beauty of her kind, a lady, as the sailors say, her lines perfect, her colors pure, and every spar and rope and pin lovingly made. Eustace, of course, could be pleased with nothing, and kept on boasting about liners and motorboats and aeroplanes and submarines, as if he knew anything about them, muttered Edmund. But the other two were delighted with the adventure, and when they returned forward to the cabin and supper, and saw the whole western sky lit up with an immense crimson sunset, and felt the quiver of the ship, and tasted the salt on their lips, and thought of unknown lands on the eastern rim of the world, Lucy felt that she was almost too happy to speak. What Eustace thought had best been told of his own words. What Eustace thought had best be told in his own words. For when they all got their clothes back, dried, and next morning, he at once got out of the little black notebook and a pencil and started to keep a diary. He had always had this notebook with him and kept a record of his marks in it. For though he didn't care much for any subject for its own sake, he cared a great deal about the marks. This is his school grades. And would even go up to people and say, "I've got so much. What did you get?" But as he didn't seem likely to get many marks on the Dawn Treader, he now started a diary. This was the first entry. August 7th. Have now been 24 hours on this ghastly boat, if it isn't a dream. All the time, a frightful storm has been raging. Good thing I'm not seasick. Huge waves keep coming over the front, and I have seen the boat nearly go under any number of times. All the others pretend to take no notice of this, either from swank or because Harold is one of the most cowardly things ordinary people do, is shut their eyes to facts. It's madness to come out into the sea in a rotten little thing like this, not much bigger than a lifeboat. And of course, absolutely primitive indoors. No proper saloon, no radio, no bathrooms, no deck chairs. I was dragged all over it yesterday evening, and it would make anyone sick to hear Caspian show off his funny little toy boat as if it was the Queen Mary. I tried to tell him what real ships are like, but he's too dense and thick-headed. E and L, of course, it's Emmett and Lucy, didn't back me up. I suppose a kid like L doesn't realize the danger, and E is buttering up the sea as everyone does here. They call him a king. I said I was a Republican, but he had to ask me what that meant. He doesn't seem to know anything at all. Needless to say, I've been put in the worst cabin of the boat, a perfect dungeon, and Lucy has been given a whole room on deck to herself, almost a nice room compared with the rest of this place. C says that that's because she's a girl. I tried to make him see what Alberta says, that all that sort of thing is really lowering girls, but he was too dense and thick-headed. Still, he might see that I shall find be ill if I'm kept to that in that hole any longer. Edmund says we mustn't grumble because Caspian is sharing it with us himself to make room for Lucy. As if that didn't make it more crowded and far worse. Nearly forgot to say that there is also a kind of mouse thing that gives everyone a most frightful cheek. The others can put up with it if they like, but I shall twist his tail pretty soon if he tries it on me. The food is frightful too. The trouble between Eustace and Reepicheep arrived even sooner than might have been expected. Before dinner the next day, when the others were sitting around the table waiting, being at sea gives one a magnificent appetite, Eustace came rushing in, wringing his hands and shouting out, "That little brute it has half killed me! I insist on it being kept under control. I could bring an action against you, Caspian. I could order you to have it destroyed." At that same moment, Reepicheep appeared. His sword was drawn and his whiskers looked very fierce, but he was as polite as ever. "Oh, I ask your pardon to all of you," he said, "and especially Her Majesty's. If I had known that he would take refuge here, I would have awaited a more reasonable time for his correction." "What on earth is happening?" asked Edmund. What had really happened was this. Reepicheep, who never felt that the ship was getting on fast enough, loved to sit on the bulwarks far forward just behind the dragon's head, gazing out at the eastern horizon and singing softly in his little chirruping voice the song of the dryad had made for him. He never held on to anything, however. The, no, he never held on to anything, however the ship pitched, and kept his balance with perfect ease. Perhaps his long tail hanging down into the deck inside the bulwarks made this easier. Everyone on board was familiar with this habit, and the sailors liked it because when one was on lookout duty, it gave one someone to talk to. Why exactly Eustace had slipped and reeled and stumbled all the way forward to the forecastle, he had not yet got his sea legs, I never heard. Perhaps he hoped that he would see land, or perhaps he wanted to hang around the galley and scrounge something. Anyway, as soon as he saw that long tail hanging down, and perhaps it was rather tempting, he thought it would be delightful to catch hold of it, swing Reepicheep around by it once or twice upside down, and then run away and laugh. At first, the plan seemed to work beautifully. The mouse was not so much heavier than the large cat. Eustace had him off the rail in a trice, and very silly he looked, thought Eustace, with his little limbs all sprayed out and his mouth open. But unfortunately, Reepicheep, who had fought for his life many a time, never lost his head for a moment, nor his skill. It was not very easy to draw one's sword when one is swinging around in the air by one's tail, but he did it. The next thing Eustace knew was two agonizing jabs in the hand, which made him let go of the tail. And the next thing after that was that the mouse has picked himself up again, as if it were a ball bouncing off the deck, and there it was facing him, and a horrid, long, bright, sharp thing like a skewer was waving to and fro within an inch of his stomach. This doesn't count as below the belt of mice in Narnia because they can hardly be expected to reach any higher. "Stop it!" spluttered Eustace. "Go away! Put that thing away! It's not safe! Stop it, I say! I'll tell Caspian! I'll have you muzzled and tied up!" "Why do you not draw your own sword, poltroon?" cheeped the mouse. "Draw and fight, or I'll beat you black and blue with the flat." "I haven't got one," said Eustace. "I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in fighting." "Do I understand," said Reepicheep, withdrawing his sword for a moment and speaking very sternly, "that you don't intend to give me satisfaction with a fight?" "I don't know what you mean," said Eustace, nursing his hand. "If you don't know how to take a joke, I shan't bother my head about you." "Then take that," said Reepicheep, "and that, to teach you manners and the respect due to a knight, and a mouse's tail." And at each word he gave Eustace a blow in the side with the side of his rapier, which was thin, fine, dwarf-tempered steel, and as supple and effective as a birch rod. Eustace, of course, was at a school where they didn't have corporal punishment, so the sensation was quite new to him. That is why In spite of having no sea legs, it took him less than a minute to get off that forecastle and cover the whole length of the deck and burst into the cabin door, still hotly pursued by Reepicheep. Indeed, it seemed to Eustace that the rapier was as well as the pursuit was hot. It might have been red hot by the feel. There was not much difficulty in settling the matter once Eustace realized that everyone took the idea of a duel seriously, and heard Caspian offering to lend him a sword, and Jornian and Edmund discussing whether he ought to have been handicapped in some way to make up for his being so much bigger than Reepicheep. He apologized sulkily and went off with Lucy to have his hand bathed and bandaged, and then went to his bunk. He was careful to lie on his side. And that's the end of the chapter. The next chapter, chapter 3, is called The Lone Islands. And thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and hope that all of you have a good day.